Thank you, Honorable Chairs. Now, we the government believe fundamentally that human life is valuable, and so believe that when we can sustain human life and the quality of human life, that is a good. We believe that in increasing the long-term perspective of people, we will fundamentally change the human experience as well as improve the way that human beings live on Earth and the way that we sustain our society, for instance. That's why we believe that we should support the production and distribution of the eternity pill. And we support that when we produce that and when it is something that is created and is something that is available, that it is also something that we should subsidize also for the poorest member in our society and something that should be available to everyone. Now we believe that firstly because we believe that sustaining life, happiness, and that quality of life are fundamentally things we consider good and are things that we already do in society when it comes to fighting diseases. Secondly, because we believe that we can avoid the loss of knowledge and the progress in relearning, as well as breaking the short-term cycle that currently pervades human policy and the way that we do things in human society. And thirdly, because we believe that it increases the value of human life and changes human perspective to a long-term perspective, which is something that we desperately need. I'll take up closing quickly.
This pill, does it exist today in 2016?
We don't think that is necessarily relevant to this debate. If this pill did exist in 2016, right here, right now, we would subsidize it, we would make it available for everyone. If it's something that's a bit further off in the future, we'd be fine with doing the same right then and there. So why do we believe that we should sustain life? Now, in general, we believe that in society, we are always seeking to sustain life, even when it goes against all odds. We do it when people are suffering through chronic illnesses, and the biggest fight we are currently fighting is that of people who are, in many cases, living longer, but who are unable to stay healthy, who are unable to stay fit, who, as old age comes, lose memories, lose the ability to function, lose the ability to live a contented and happy life. Precisely as though if we had a cure for cancer, we would provide that to people, so would we provide this cure against aging. Because cancer is often very much a disease that is part of our naturally extending lifespans. The fact that cancer comes when sort of cells multiply too much, and the fact that cancer is precisely that kind of disease that we are currently finding the most, we believe that this would precisely be the cure to that, and that would help immensely a massive amount of people who currently are seeing their lives cut short, as well as the quality of their lives cut short. But secondly, I want to talk about why we want to avoid the loss of knowledge and progress that is currently happening and the forcing of relearning, right? So currently, human perspective and human knowledge is limited to one lifetime. The greatest scientists always have to pass on what they're working on. They have to we lose some of their work when they, of course, unfortunately pass away. And we're limited in our research to what can be done in one lifetime. Imagine what we could do if we as a human race could have the best minds of each generation available to us for the next 500 years, who could continue to work on these things. Imagine the leaps and bounds we could make. But furthermore, also in the way that we live our lives and the way that we commit to policy, right? When it comes to the political cycles, we are only able to look for the short-term goals. In almost any country, we will simultaneously create things like massive tax cuts whilst we expand entitlements, even when that will bankrupt the next generations, even when that is unsustainable fundamentally, because we can't see beyond that cycle. If we're able to expand, basically remove the upper limit for a person's natural lifespan, that means the political cycle itself would change. It would become about what is a sustainable cycle for the rest of sort of humanity. What is a sustainable cycle and a fair system that benefits sort of everyone? And we think that is extremely valuable because we believe that we fundamentally need more long-term thinking in life, right? And that's what's going to be my third point, which is why this increases the value of human life as well as changing the perspective, right? So we currently believe that people value human life in many ways, and we're fundamentally scared of death. So, I mean, we tend to react to that by we kind of see our children as an extension of ourselves. We have children, we hope that our name will be remembered somewhere. And because we're afraid of death, we're often willing to take huge risks to make sure that either our genes are passed on or that our name is remembered. And we see that because we're willing to take these risks, we also see life as less valuable, right? Because though death is frightening, it's far less frightening when our life is already limited, right? It's much easier for somebody to convince you that you need to die for honor, that you need to go kill the enemy, that you need to go kill the enemy so that your relatives can live instead, that you need to go risk and accept something like war when your lifespan is limited anyway, and so you're not really throwing away that much. When a lifespan is theoretically limitless, that also means that the value of human life, both your own in taking those risks, but also in taking another person's life, is far, far greater. And that's why we believe that'll have a great impact on reducing war in our society. But furthermore, we also believe that people spend a lifetime accumulating short-term resources in order to be able to live off of these resources when they are no longer able to work. We save up for retirement and we take on jobs, we destroy the environment just so that we can have some kind of resources to live on when we are incapable of working anymore. But the problem is that it means that even though we care about the environment in a vague way, but it's so hard for us to imagine our great-great-great-great-grandkids that it's not enough of a motivator for most people. But if your lifespan is unlimited, if your lifespan is going to be the one that is affected by the environmental damage, if the fact of the matter is that you will never be so old and sort of infirm that you are not able to work, that also means that you're not in the same rush to gather the short-term resources so that you can then retire and die on those resources. You are more likely to look at how we can work sustainably, how we can not destroy the earth whilst making sort of our own life livable. And we believe that maybe we're expecting that the opposition is going to be afraid of something like overpopulation and what might happen there. But we think that the reason why people in general have that absolute drive to have children is precisely because they see their children as a needed extension of themselves. But we also believe that birth rates are declining as people are able to live longer, are able to live happier, and parents in general are getting older. We think that it's less likely with an eternity pill like this that people will feel that same need, and we think that birth rates will decline. But furthermore, we think that even if that is the case, we think that as you get a more long-term view, we're more likely to try to figure out how to live sustainably on this earth. And we think that the fact of the matter is that most scientists have even said that we're going to have to go off-world. Most scientists have said that at the rate that global warming is, that unless we come up with a solution, or unless we come up with a way to colonize other planets, the human race as it stands is probably doomed. So the only way to do that is to have the greatest minds of our generation available to work for longer than one lifetime, for us to be able to open that up. And only then can we create that. So for all these reasons, because we believe that fundamentally sustaining human life and happiness for as long as possible is something we already do in society and something we should continue doing, because we believe that we should avoid the loss of knowledge and better the policy cycle that we currently have, and because we believe this increases the value of human life and increases a long-term perspective, we beg you to support this motion. Thank you.
I thank Aalto for his fine speech, and I will be one leader of opposition in the open case on behalf of Riga.
Honorable Speaker, what makes me value my life isn't the fact that I'm just alive and I'm here. It's the fact that I'm going to die someday, right? I know that I have limited time to do the things that I want to do, limited time to go to debate tournaments, finish university, start a company, do like a lot of awesome things, right? Because if I don't do any of these things, I'll never have these experiences and I'll never be able ever be able to do them. But even if this wasn't true, right, we think that giving more economic and political power to people who are already in power is a very, very bad thing to do. We're very, very proud to stand in opposition in this motion, right? Firstly, a response to like what Aalto says, right? Aalto tells you that, you know, people's quality of life deteriorates over time, like see old people and Alzheimer's and stuff like that, right? Firstly, we're not against like combating diseases in general. Like we think like we should invest an incredible amount of resources in that, right? We're okay if a person lives 100 years and those years like he lives healthy and nicely and stuff like that. We're not okay with giving people unlimited extension to their lifespan, right? This is the principle that we stand on. Secondly, no, this idea about smart people, how smart people make change. Currently, we have mechanisms in society through which people pass down their knowledge, right? So if I'm a great scientist, all of my articles that I publish are sort of like up there online, right? All my research that I have done trickles down through systems such as education and things like that. The comparative with their side is that when I'm alive, right, I'm less likely to like want to give away my knowledge, right? I'm the smart guy everyone like are gonna come to, right? I'm the guy who runs a laboratory, I'm the guy who is in power, right? The alternative is that when I die, I give this knowledge to everyone, right? And everyone can use this knowledge, right? We think that this has like way more impact than what Alf talks about, right? Because now more people have access to this knowledge and more people can work with this knowledge, right? We think that that is a lot better, right? Thirdly, no, yeah, I'm gonna engage with the environment point, you know, why not, right? Firstly, we think that like the fact that, you know, like essentially you're gonna have two choices, right? Firstly, either you allow for this huge overpopulation to happen, right? Or you're gonna need significant limits on the way that we can reproduce. That means that people miss out on things such as parenthood, right? People miss out on a lot of experiences, right? Because you can't have any more kids, right? For the fact that, you know, like the world's getting more and more crowded, right? He says, you know, that, yeah, but, you know, it doesn't matter, right? Because we need to find, you know, other planets, like, to do something, right? We think that, like, this point is, like, essentially non-comparative. Either this is gonna happen or it's not, or it's not gonna happen, right? We think that, like, it happens faster, right? This deterioration in overpopulation happens faster, right? It's more likely that we're gonna infringe on we're gonna be forced to infringe on human rights, you know, for the fact that people can live forever. Why limited life makes me do stuff. Alf tells you life is valuable. We think that what gives value to your life is the fact that it's limited, right? It's the fact that I know that I'm going to die, right? That's what the biggest value of life is, essentially is, right? We think that the fact that I come to debate tournaments, right? The fact that I actually do anything I get up in the morning, right? Is the fact that I know I have limited time and I know this I have to do. So how does like translates then? Firstly, no, what primarily like sort of like makes people happy, right, is when they do like various experiences, right? The reason why I do experiences is because I have motivation. The primary thing that motivates me, right, is death, right? Is fear of death, is the fact that I'm going to die, right? So the comparative with what they say, you know, even if I have more time, I have more things to do stuff, right? But you have less motivation to do stuff, right? If you're like alive and you know that, oh, I can go to like the next Estonian Open, which I maybe won't, right? I don't know, but like the fact that I know that I can do it like makes more likely that I'm going to sit home and play computer games. I don't know, do something like that. But secondly, and more importantly, like if I think that I have a limited time, it means that, you know, makes me less likely that I'll go and do stuff, right? Makes it more likely that I'll go and party in clubs and, you know, like do other stupid shit, right? So when I like age and, you know, like a disease suddenly hits me, a disease that can be cured, like I missed out on all of these things, right? It's better for me to think that I'm gonna die anyways very, very soon, right? Because in that case, I'm more likely to do these things, more likely, more likely to be happy, right? Like then I'm gonna engage this idea that like this is likely to reduce war, right? We think it's like a weakling, but anyways, right? We think that the fact that you value human life, human life sort of more in general, actually like makes you engage in less force. Ruth will probably elaborate on that. Secondly, very, very importantly, like what this is going to create, no, unequal society. We think this is very likely this will translate into a two-class society, right? A society that we do not want to live in, right? Firstly, because it's going to make the existing inequalities even worse. Why is that true, right? Firstly, if you have more time, you have more time to collect more money, right? You have more time to educate yourself, more time to expand my huge business empire, right? Collect more people that I control, sort of like stay in more power, right? Means that like people who are already privileged are going to have like increased access like to these resources. We think that like it is sort of like bad on itself, right? We think it like means that they have more time to become more smart, more time to figure out how can I abuse other people to make my life super nice, right? Their answer to this is we're gonna subsidize it for the poor, right? Firstly, right, we think that the fact that like more people have more time to hold on to power, more time to connect knowledge means that essentially they'll control the distribution, right? If people control economic and political levers of power, right, they're probably going to be able to like tap into that, you know, like CEOs and stuff like that. We think it's harmful because they're very, very likely to abuse this for their own personal gain, right? Secondly, social mobility. Social mobility already sucks in a society in which inequalities increase rapidly. This makes social mobility even worse, right? Because now when I'm born, I have to compete, you know, with all these people who are way, way smarter than I am. We think that it's bad. Before I go on, closing, if you have anything. Yes, go.
The problem that the life is not, there's no death coming up is solved by the fact that there are huge amounts of accidents happening to people, so you can never count on life being eternal and you having a whole lot of time to do everything.
But I mean, like if I know that I'm going to, like, if I think I'm not going to die, right, and I don't do anything, the fact that like I'm going to get sick is already like bad in itself, because then I'll realize, all these things that I could have done, I won't do, right? Alternatives that if I thought I was going to die, right, I would do all these things and that's better, right? Secondly, vulnerable groups, right? We think that it's very realistically that not a lot of people will use this, right? We think that people who will think that this is against God, I mean, religious people in general, people who believe life is precious, that you shouldn't do it, right, are all people who are not going to use this, like probably mostly in developing countries. We think it's problematic because this creates a class of society which doesn't, is already discriminated against, right? It means that you create two classes of society, you as people who have like extended life and people who do not want to do this, people who do not want to take this. We think like in general it means that like they live in, they sort of like live in a worse world, right? We think that what makes my life valuable is the fact that I have limited time. I don't want like I don't know, like old vampires sucking out distribution resources from everyone, right? We don't think that that's a good thing. Because of that, we oppose.
I thank Rasmus for his fine speech, and I'm moving on to the Deputy Prime Minister's constitution case on behalf of Riga.
All right, I'm going to tell you more about how the eternity pill will change how we as people view the human experience and how that will lead to more empathy, a better humankind, a more sustainable and peaceful humankind. I'm going to talk first about human rights. After that, I'm going to talk about how this will make war less likely and less bloody. And after that, finally, I'm going to talk about motivation, responding directly to some of the things that Rasmus said. However, before that, I have quite a bit of rebuttal. So, first of all, we get this idea that the only reason life is valuable because of death. Now, it's completely unclear to us why things like books and music and dinners with your friends and debates are somehow contingent, like enjoying those things is contingent on the knowledge that you're going to die someday. We think that those things are fundamentally enjoyable in and of themselves to lots of people, and we think that prolonging life so that you can do more of the things that you want and make you happy is like just fundamentally a good thing to do. They're going to need to prove a lot more to say a lot more to prove that the only reason those things have value is that you know you're going to die. We didn't really buy that. No. The truth is also that lots of people do enjoy work and do enjoy research and do enjoy education as well. I'll come back to this more when I talk about the motivation point. We also get the idea that our scientist point is moot because these scientists can also write those ideas down. But the truth is that if we still had Newton around, if we still had Einstein around, we could be making, if we still had all the great theoretical physicists of the last 100 years still around, still contributing to science, still collaborating, still teaching new generations of students, we would be able to make progress at a far greater rate than we are doing today. Because those are great minds. Those are people who helped humankind make significant leaps in science and technology. Something that, doesn't come along very often, but when it does, contributes hugely to human progress, right? They also try to claim that it leads to knowledge hoarding. We don't really get any analysis of why science would fundamentally work differently. We think that people contribute to the open project of science. There would be there's no reason why that goes away under the model. Then about the environment. So, they say that we're going to have to limit parenthood. We think people in general want to have less children if your children live for a very long time. We also think that because of the way that people will be more sustainably minded, we can also have more people on the planet, right? Like if we learn to live in peace with the planet, then we kind of curb many of those sustainability challenges. And when you add to that what we give you about science and technology and about how this enables us to get to space quicker than that's also shot down. They claim that space exploration is non-comparative, but of course it's comparative if we can prove that on our side we're more likely to explore space, to colonize other planets quicker, which we are if you believe that science and technology are going to be aided by having our best engineers, our best scientists, the people working on the most challenging projects still around, and not limited by human age. Recognize that the amount of time that our best scientists and engineers actually work at the top of their field is only 30 or 40 years. That's a very, very short time, and they accomplish amazing things in that time. Imagine if those people were with us for another 100, another 1,000 years collaborating, what we could accomplish. No. And then finally, like, some people will opt out. We think it's fine to opt out. However, we also think that a fundamental principle in many religions is the sanctity of life. And we think that a pill that prolongs life would be something that many religions would quite easily be able to incorporate into their doctrines, and that would be just fine. On to my first point about human rights. So many of the struggles of recent history have been the struggles of different groups for rights, for dignity. Women's rights, LGBTQ rights, different kinds of minority rights. Now, in a world where we're going to value human life more, we're going to value the human experience more, we think that all of those goals will be easier to achieve. It'll be easier to convince people that those are valuable goals. Because progress in these issues is generally made when a group is recognized as people, that their experiences are valid, they have value, and that their suffering is real, right? Why is this more likely to happen on our side? Because the model increases respect for the human experience just in general. In the status quo, life is something that's short, it's brutish, something where you need to achieve many things very quickly, you need to kind of protect your own ends, you need to deal with your own goals. This reduces the amount of sympathy that we have for other people, especially people who are different than us. The shift that happens when you have life that is very long or eternal is that we sympathize more with others. We value the lives just for being human lives. Everyone deserves dignity who is a person. Everyone deserves education. Everyone deserves chances. People are more likely to vote for these issues, support these issues in general, and sympathize with people. Now, Rasmus said that this just leads some people to amass power. But because of what I'm telling you about how it also increases sympathy, we don't think that many of the bad things he says actually happen. Right? Because the people with power are more likely to sympathize with everyone, and there's more. Rasmus, go ahead.
Okay, so there's a difference between short-term happiness, me eating lunch, and long-term happiness, me getting a nice debating career or starting a company, right? On your side, like, these things happen less, right? It means that, like, people are generally less happy about the lives that they have.
Like, we just don't agree with your characterization. Okay, so this is a point about motivation, right? Like, you can play computer games all day if you want. We still think that people will start companies, for example. We think lots of people really enjoy that. We think people will do research, they'll go to work, because there's still lots of benefits in that, right? Like, if you can earn money, if you can get respect, if you can get power, if you can get a fulfilling life, there's no reason that goes away just because we don't die, right? Finally, a short point about reducing war. We think that there will be much bigger cost to war, both to a country that initiates war, because you put people in danger, and since human life is valued more, there's a higher cost to go. There's also a higher cost on the other side. And we also think the benefits go down. When we have a society that's more focused on the long term and less materialistic, there's also less incentive to go to war, to go for those materialistic gains. Because we'll get more human rights, we'll reduce war, you should vote for the motion. Thank you.
I thank Aalto for his fine speech, and I will be one of the deputy leaders in opposition to conclude the case on behalf of opening up here.
Honourable Chair, I'm going to talk about three main things. Firstly, I want to talk about this overpopulation point and why we think it is a problem. Second of all, I want to talk about happiness and why we think that life sucks and the world sucks, and essentially you're not going to be happy when you see more of it. Lastly, I want to talk about how generational change is incredibly important for us, actually changing our opinions and having nice things like gay rights. Okay, before that, some rebuttal. So, we get the question of like, why is death a motivator? And why does it actually change stuff? Because you like doing things. The thing is that doing things is actually quite hard. It is coming to this competition to challenge myself is something that is hard for me to do. I have to get over it. Working on something for a very long time to reach some goal is something that is hard to motivate myself to do because it does require work. It is not computer games, which is a short-term pleasure that I can just enjoy. It is something that I do because I think I have to achieve certain things because my life is limited. I have this idea in my head that I have to do something with my life, and that only applies when I think that life is limited, that I will go out and actually do it. No, thank you. Second of all, scientific excellence. Why would people hoard knowledge? People hoard knowledge and money because it gives them power. When you have, like, you give that stuff away when you have no interest in actually having that stuff anymore. That may not be every single scientist or every single rich person, but most of the people who are like hoarding stuff generally don't care once they die and give it away to someone else, often to society, therefore helping them a lot. We think that having that massive inequality over time, that these people will hoard up all the resources, is going to be incredibly problematic, and they'll have a lot of control. Spaceships. They say we should fly to another planet because climate change is shit, and we're going to have all this scientific excellence that is going to solve that. So climate change will kill us in like 100 years or 200 years. That's a lifespan. I don't think that they will hoard up that amount of knowledge in that lifespan any more than a regular person would in the status quo, where they will live those 100 years anyway, right? They don't immediately become like these cool scientists who know everything once they take the pill. They have to live through a life to get there. So climate change will kill us before that, right? Lastly, I'm going to clarify this one thing about the subsidies, right? So Rasmus already pointed out to you that even though the subsidy exists in the start, once people get a lot of power, they can change that law. Because they will like have so much resources, so much political connections, so much power that they will accumulate over a long period of time. They can then change that law. They have an interest in changing that law because powerful people want to stay powerful. Very simple logic. We also think that probably this is going to be developed somewhere in the Western world and is not necessarily going to like be given to everyone in the third world, or be accessible to them, because like the mechanisms of distributing this pill are going to be somewhat problematic in countries where you don't have nice legal systems and other shit. No, thank you. Overpopulation, right? So we're on the verge of a catastrophic climate change, and part of that is due to the fact that people are hoarding, that there's limited resources that some rich people control, and we have a lot of people, right? They tell us, well, this is not going to be a problem because people will not have children because we only have children to, I don't know, have a legacy. We think people have families because they want love. They want someone who will love them unconditionally. They want to create someone. They want to help someone grow up and be awesome. This is not just legacy, right? People have children because they want someone in their family that will love them, essentially, right? So we don't think that's actually true, and we think at the point where people stop dying, it's going to be somewhat problematic. It's going to be even more problematic when you have a few people hoarding up a lot of stuff, generally, and it's not going to be accessible to people. Okay, happiness. So Alf tells you that life is valuable and death is bad. We're not quite sure why death is bad, right? We think death is neutral. Death is bad insofar that you lose some part of your life that you would have otherwise lived. But if that part of life that you would have lived is horrible, we think that death is generally okay, right? We think that's also the same thing of why we're afraid of death. But we're, I think, even more afraid of living and suffering for eternity. We think that that sucks quite a lot, and we think most people wouldn't want that, right? So if the life you actually live for a longer time is shittier than the life you live for a short term, we prefer the short-term life, no thank you. So, why is life shit? So, a few things you already hear from Rasmus, which is essentially that we will have massively increased inequality because rich people will have more time to hoard up resources and power. Second of all, we think the lack of motivation to actually pursue stuff means that once you are killed by that disease, you would not have had pursued stuff in the first place. Thirdly, we think the world is actually like really ugly. The world is something that when you experience it, when you read the news, horrifies you. People do incredibly bad things. That is not to say that there aren't good things. There are good things. But that's generally a statistic that people who read the news, who engage with the world, are more depressed, hate the world more. The more you live it, the more you see it, the more horrified you will be by the wars and the evil that people do. We think you will live unhappily forever. That will suck. right? Because the world is not a pretty place always, and a lot of the people, like a lot of people do incredibly bad things. I will take opening.
Alright, so people are spending longer in school, having careers, starting careers later, having children, getting married later, and yet people are more fulfilled, more able to self-actualize, and happier. Why is 100 years some magic lifespan and a magic number that we should just stick with, no matter what?
Okay, so first of all, we think people are doing those things later because they believe that they will live for a longer time. Exact point of why they're not motivated to do stuff early. Second of all, this idea that they're more fulfilled, where does that come from? Like, I am not sure that people in today's world are less depressed than people a few years, 2 decades ago. I don't think that's actually true. The depression rates that we see are rising and people are incredibly unhappy. So, just having that assertion is not going to win you this debate. Okay. This idea about generational values and the fact that you need to value life because then you will be okay to gaze, basically. First of all, if your life is shit, you're not going to value it anymore. So we think that at the point where you believe that your life is going to be relatively horrible, you're not going to have that link that they have there of people will value life because it's this cool long thing, because it being just long is not really good enough. It has to also be good to be valuable, right? We also think that if you are someone who was born, you are learned certain values, and then it's very hard for you to get rid of those values. Generational change is incredibly important for people to actually start supporting stuff like gay rights, because if you grew up in a society and everything intrinsically was taught to you from your childhood that you should not accept gays, you're likely to not accept gays. There's a reason why older generations of people generally are more sexist, more racist, more anti-LGBT, and people that are younger that grew up in a world which was different are more accepting of progressive values. If you don't have that generation change, you will have a lot of old people telling you how to live your life, who will have old values and who will not change and be liberal. We think that overall, you don't want a shit life that is long. You don't want to suffer for eternity. We're incredibly proud to oppose.
I thank both top-up teams for their excellent contributions thus far, and I warmly call upon a member of government to open the case on behalf of Tartu
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to have a one-point extension, but before that, I'm going to have 4 big points of rebuttal responding to everything that we have heard from opposition so far. So starting from motivational aspect, they say that death motivates people. We think this is extremely oversimplified as to how human motivations actually work. We think that it's a fact that probably everyone in this room is going to agree with, that the biomechanical impulses that actually force people to do stuff and the emotions that those impulses and the neurochemical reactions that are released when we, act upon certain stimuli are extremely varied. And they're not only based on fear or fear of death, more particularly. They're also based on things like, hedonistic things like seeking out happiness and all of that stuff. And we also think, moreover, there is a second layer on it, why the motivational aspect is much more multifaceted than what they are trying to portray it as, because it varies based on social context. For example, in the case of religious people who don't fear death and think that heaven is probably a better existence than life on earth, dying is not necessarily going to be a motivator for those people to accomplish things now because they're not really scared of it. That's something that's going to be pretty natural. So the fundamental point that I'm trying to get at here is that the burden on their side of the house is to prove why there's some sort of a fundamental exclusive motivational benefit stemming from people fearing death, why it cannot be replaced by other impulses, when there cannot be meaningful change in the absence of that impulse. Second point of rebuttal, they talk about inequality and why people are going to hoard more knowledge and more power, and this is going to lead to more inequality, which is a bad thing, right? We think that we have a countervailing element to this embedded in our policy, which is essentially that we're going to have a lot more technological progress for all the reasons the first government already talked to you about, and it's often technological progress that is able to effectively combat inequality. We think that inequality, in essence, is often based on scarcity of resources, and when supply of those resources increases, then this inequality is eliminated. For example, with the spread of modern farming techniques or the Industrial Revolution, the supply of many goods increased to the point that we were able to lift millions or hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. We think that an analogous point that we could achieve, for example, under our model, is that when we're able to replace all of our energy production with renewable sources, this will probably eliminate a lot of the sort of scarcity which is a basis of inequality in the world today. And we don't think that they can clearly say that there's going to be more inequality with our policy being implemented. Third point, they say that when people stay alive longer, the old values are going to stay, and those old values are bad, for example, because old people hate gays or are racist or all that stuff. Well, we don't think that this is entirely true, because social change is still going to occur. People are still going to die of diseases, which is going to be like a huge number. Like a lot of people get sick when they get old, and people are still going to die of accidents. So we do agree that this change is going to occur at a slower pace, but I think it's still going to occur. So there's not going to be a complete stagnation of values, so to speak. Now moving on to a very big point of rebuttal, which concerns overpopulation. And I want to give you a rights-based logic here. We think that we would like to ask the opposition teams whether we would also be willing to kill people, just like outright cull populations in order to combat overpopulation in extreme situations. Because this is essentially the burden that they are taking. The acts of denying the alternative pill when it exists and killing a person are fundamentally the same. The nature of one act is more passive because you're denying the pill, not actively killing the person. But in both instances, the actions that you take lead to the another person losing his life. And we think that this is generally something like, regardless of the nature of the action, regardless whether it's passive or not, that civilized societies reject. That's why we also prosecute people for criminal negligence, for example. We prosecute you when you don't try to help a drowning person, when it doesn't put your life at risk, when you're perfectly willing to help that person. They have to show us or prove to us if this policy is justified denying right to life to people in this case, why things like culling populations or using people as organ farms, for example, are also justified or not justified. Right. Okay, if you have a point, I'll take closing.
Do you think most people actually want to live forever?
I don't really know. I'm not going to speculate. Some do, some don't. Probably a lot of people would take the pill. Okay, so moving on to my extension. Why do we need to continue the human civilization and the value in that, and why it is of paramount importance to strive for continuing our civilization in the short term, and what entails? Essentially think that the existence or the sustenance of the human race is essentially limited by the characteristics of our ecosystem and also how we have used our ecosystem. Essentially, resources are exhaustible. They're going to run out, which is pretty much going to put a block to our modern way of life. And also global warming is probably going to be a big problem. Things like peak oil, all of that stuff. And as they said, this is probably going to happen in the very short term, and this is key, probably like in the next 100 of years. So we're essentially in a ticking time bomb scenario. If we want to ensure that human civilization is continued, we have to do something now. And this is extremely problematic for several reasons, because we have seen that political measures have overwhelmingly failed to combat those issues. Like the Paris Climate Conference, which is supposed to be huge, did pretty much nothing, just voluntary contributions based on those, for countries. So essentially, we think that what is happening right now is that a lot of people are sort of fed up with the politics. They think that politics is futile, that there's not going to be any change anyway. And why this is problematic under the current system is that because people are facing wasted on opportunity cost. They have a very limited number of years in peak condition where they have a lot of energy. And when they think that the planet is screwed anyway, then even when they care about the planet, they're not going to spend those years on working to combat climate change and work on the advancement of scientific progress, but they're going to have fun with it instead because they think that the system is essentially screwed. Now, when they have the alternative pill, they can say that as I have more peak years left, I might as well try now to save the planet because that is something, even if I have a very slim chance of doing it, because that is something that I also care about, right? So we think that this sort of social structural change is actually the main reason why we would be able to advance meaningful change with the alternative pill being present and distributed to everyone. Thank you.
We think that the desire to leave a legacy is one of the key things that motivates people to do great things and to do things that are even make our civilization worth existing. We think there is no point in an eternal life in a world where there is nothing of value and nothing great for you to expect for. I will talk about three things. First about legacy, secondly about death, and thirdly about why we need to age and why we need to go through the process of aging. Before that, most of the rebuttal will be integrated one point before that. Their last point from the closing government, they tell us that people will be more likely to combat climate change because of reasons, like, doesn't matter. Well, anyway, the point is, maybe that's true. Like, it might be even true that for whatever reasons you said, they are more likely to combat climate change. But the point is, it won't matter at that point anyway. Because if you have a huge population of people who are also going to have children for all of the reasons that opening already talked about, because people want to have children for love or for feelings of commitment, then at this point it won't even matter if they're trying to save the planet, because with the amount of people we already have today, we are pretty much hopelessly done by this point if you have all of these people. So it won't matter, we'll die anyway if we have so many people. We don't have enough water, food, space, or anything to sustain that kind of population. But on to my own point. So first of all, about legacy. We think that, as I said before, one of the primary motivations for human progress is to wish to leave a legacy. Because we want to be remembered after we die, because that's our only way to keep on living after that. And we think that for that, we do great things in art or science or architecture or anything really, because that's our only way, like being great and doing something amazing is our only way to exist past the point when we have died already. And we think that the fruits of this wish to survive after you've died is like all the great things that this civilization and the human race has produced. Great architecture, like, I don't know, the Uffizi Gallery, or like the fact that we went to the moon. These are all statements that we want to leave for the generation to come, to show that we have made an impact on this planet and our lives have been worthwhile. And we have seen also historically how places that are more filled with violence and war and strife, where death is more prevalent and where like death is something that people think about more, are like societies that usually create more art and create more like architecture and literature than societies that are more peaceful. For instance, like Renaissance Italy was always very bloody but always very full of art. At the same time, Switzerland, which was very peaceful, did not have the same impulse because they did not feel the urgency to create something great, because they didn't feel the urgency of death. We think that under their model, what will happen is that if you are the legacy, right? You won't die, and you don't have to show yourself after you're dead because you will live on. The point is that one, you're less likely to do these great things. You're less likely to do great things to be remembered after you die because you won't be dying. Or even if you want to do them, even if you have in the back of your head that I want to do great art or great science, you will probably never reach this point because you can always say that I will do this later. You don't have a feeling of urgency that you need to do this now, other otherwise you will never get to do this. So in the end, we get less of all of these things. But the reason that these things matter is that all of this progress that we get from science is something that benefits all of us, and all of these things that we get from art and literature and architecture, or even the things that make our life worth living. Like the reason we even feel that we have something here on this world is because we have something to enjoy, and these things that we enjoy and these things that give our lives meaning are things that people have created in order to leave a legacy. We think that the world is not really worth being there if you don't have great art or great science or great things to enjoy. We think we'll have less of those under their model. It will be a boring and futile life without all these things. Opening.
Even if some people are less motivated, isn't it true that some people will still choose to become researchers or artists, and they will have hundreds of years to produce wonderful works of art and wonderful new research?
But the point is that why would you produce something if you have all the time in the world to produce more? You don't have the feeling of urgency that this is important for my legacy. You don't have the feeling that if I don't do this, that I will never be remembered. Because you have all the eternity to do this again, you will probably never reach that point when you feel you have to do it now, or you will never do it at all. Second point about death. We think that, as opening already says, people want to live, people want to live forever, probably only when they're young. But at a certain point, they will reach a point where they don't want to live forever anymore. When they feel that life is futile and there's nothing they will ever want to do anymore, and everything, like they don't want to live. So the question is now, what are they going to do? The obvious choice is the only thing that they can do is to kill themselves. But the problem is that most people can't do that. Most people who want to commit suicide change their mind, because it's in the human instinct. You cannot, it's very difficult to do that because every impulse in your body tells you not to. So most people will never reach that point where they have the courage to kill themselves. And the problem is that these people will have to keep on living despite the fact that they don't have anything to live for, they don't feel that their life is worth anything. So we think that that life is not worth living. We think that life is horrible, and if we don't want to lock people into an eternity of a life that they don't want to have, because most people don't have the courage to kill themselves, and most people right now already who go and try to kill themselves change their minds at the last moment, we think that this will happen here as well. We don't want to doom most of our society into that hell when they live for eternity without having anything to live for. We think we need to prevent that from happening in the first place. So for that reason, also, we should win. And third point about why we need to age. The thing is that there are horrors in the world, and most people on this planet live in a bad way, either in poverty or in war or in all kinds of horrible conditions, or at least a huge percentage of the population is like this. We think that under their model, it's less likely that anything is going to be ever changed, because when you're always young, beautiful, healthy, and strong, you don't necessarily feel any empathy towards those people who are not like this, because you're unlikely to feel that they are like you, or you feel that you have everything and you don't necessarily want to help them because you feel no connection. And so under their model, it's very unlikely that this whole class of always healthy and always young and always pretty people have any emotional connection to those who are poor or who are in war or in terrible conditions. We think that under our model, aging, the process of aging, gives you that feeling of weakness, of helplessness. It makes you understand how it is to feel really horrible by no fault of your own. And if you have that emotion yourself, you're more likely to want to help others like this. This way, we have a chance of dealing with all these horrible conditions. Under their model, all these happy people will probably never want to. For all these reasons, please vote for us.
Thank you for a fine speech, and I warmly call upon the government whip to plead the case on behalf of Tartu. Hear, hear.
So the underlying problem that we have with closing's case is the fact that they tell us that people want to have children, for example, in order for those children to be raised in the second generations. They need to make art in order for others to enjoy it. But the underlying assumption there is that that environment, that Earth, is going to exist in a form how people are going to be able to inhabit it. This is something that they're not simply going to refute with saying that, oh, people don't care anyway, because if we have overpopulation, then nobody is going to work for bettering life on Earth, or actually overcoming environmental issues. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you 3 points of rebuttal, and then I'm going to talk to you how do we solve the problem of the extinction of humankind, and we're going to focus on it very thoroughly, and we're going to extend it from the part where OG said that people are just going to have more motivation to do science, to the extent that we need this motivation in order for humankind to exist in our society. But first things first, what we heard from Becky was first of all the fact that overpopulation means that we're already doomed because people can't do anything anyway. Well, what she did is completely ignore Rauna's analysis on the fact that if we have technological advances due to the fact that people are more devoted to technology and to science, then what we can do is we can alleviate scarcity of resources, which means that more people are going to be better off, and there won't be the problems with inequality that we currently have in our society. What she secondly did is that she said that it's overpopulation is inevitable. We also think it's inevitable under the status quo, where we have people born into the societies where we don't have enough resources to provide them. The question is, how do we progress from this moment on? Do we put emphasis on resolving these problems, or don't we? We think that they haven't proven us how they're going to actually alleviate these problems of, for example, a lot of towns, a lot of countries being flooded, how the fact that we're very, very dependent on oil, for example, in our transportation sector, for example, providing food to all of these people that currently are actually suffering under scarcity, etc. So what we got from there is, and furthermore, we think that it also matters because the scientific development actually allows us to inhabit other planets if we do it fast enough, if we get more of that under my own argument. But we think that she ignored the fact that we gave a solution to the fact that we have an overpopulation. And even if we have more people that we can feed right now, then if we have scientific advancement, we can actually solve the problem. Secondly, she talked to us about legacy. She's told that legacy is important. That's the only motivation why people do this stuff. I think that the opening government has dealt with this very clearly, but we are also going to add to this, right? First of all, we didn't hear an answer from Vicky to the analysis of Rauna, how we all need to give the people a right to life. For example, we wouldn't be killing people just because just like that, but if we have a pill and we don't provide it to people, and we say that human life is something that's superior, human life is something that is usually we do provide you if you haven't done anything else wrong in the society, then we haven't heard an explanation why we shouldn't, or why it's unjustified to actually be giving it to people. We think it is unjustified. We think that people deserve it to actually realize the full potential to be happy throughout their life. Secondly, we think that what people want is not legacy, but what people want is recognition for the work. So it doesn't matter whether they get it during their lifetime or after their life, right? And the problem right now is because the lifespan is limited, they get it after their life, and we all know that somebody's legacy is valued. But in this case, we could value the work that they're doing currently in our society. We could give them the feedback that you're awesome, that we really appreciate you in our society. We think that would be even better situation. And thirdly, exactly, the presumption here is that this legacy that we leave to other people is something that we can leave to other people, meaning that we need to have an existing society, a functioning society, a livable environment to live in order for other people in the future to actually gain anything from this solution, right? Then she talked about empathy and saying that people want to help each other if they can feel how it is to be weak. We think that currently people aren't doing it because they feel selfish, because they feel that their lifespan is limited and they need to live for themselves. So it kind of evens it out, right? Because they are not going to be more empathic because they're selfish. If under our scenario, they might also understand that if people get diseases, if people have some kind of problems, then they're still empathic, they still help them, but they don't have to be selfish anymore because they have all the time and energy to put under other things also, etc. Now, before I move on to our own extension, yes?
Okay, people now know that climate change is probably inevitable and it's going to affect us in our lifetime, right? But still, like, we're not doing a lot about it. So
Yes,
why
yes.
exactly this specific bill is going to change motivation?
This is what Rona told you about. This is the crux of our case. It changes because people now understand that they actually have a meaningful chance to put some kind of effort into changing this fact, right? Because currently people think that their lives are limited, they can only do so much in the scientific research, and furthermore they think that they need to do all other things, they need to experience all other things during their lifetime, so they're not going to prioritize this development and this kind of a contribution to the scientific advancement. Thus, there is so much less innovation, and that's the key crux what's going to change it. This brings me very well to summarizing our case and to telling you why we can actually avoid the extinction of humankind, right? Because we think that currently people, what they do are a lot of selfish things. They want to experience life, and thus they don't actually, they don't prioritize the social goals, for example, like scientific advancement. But now that they have a chance to do that during their 30 years, they can spend another 100 on actually developing scientific advances. And as I just said, we're going to have a huge amount of people added here who currently don't enter the field due to the fact that they think that they cannot really do anything about it, right? And what it brings us to is the fact that we are going to have technological development that helps alleviate the core problem of scarcity of resources, that actually deals with the opening opposition's problem with inequality. What it actually gives us is also the fact that there will be less hoarding in the society and people will be more happier in contributing to the social cause, and we will actually have another generation who can have our legacy and enjoy it. And when they tell us that people don't want to live forever, then we think that there is it is a decision that they're making. They can also not make this decision, and they can also catch diseases if they don't want to commit suicide, and this life can also end. We think it is an option that you can step out of, and we think that this is not the core problem here. We need to resolve imminent problems such as our environmental issues, and please, I'm very proud to propose.
I thank Kate for a fine speech, and I will be called upon the opposition workers to do the case on behalf of LAMP and the debate as a whole.
Ladies and gentlemen, team government presented us a problem. Basically, Earth is screwed. Why is Earth screwed? For two reasons. Firstly, we have too many people. Secondly, we have too little resources to sustain these people. Their solution, we are going to create more people that are somehow going to fix this mess. We think that if we really are going to be extinct, let's say in 200 years, unless we discover new technologies, for example, for inhabiting Mars, let's give this pill to 1,000 scientists. But the team government, they never proved why we have to give it to everyone, right? We think that, giving it to only 1,000 people would still be a bad idea for all the arguments we have given to you, but it would be a better idea, because at least then we would actually have the resources to build the spaceships with that could carry us to the Mars. Furthermore, we can never be sure that these scientists actually are going to discover something. We've been working on the new nuclear reactor for the past 60 years, and still nothing has came up from it. We don't think we can actually, turn into a super evolutionary alien space nation with few hundred years. We don't think this is reasonable. I would like to talk about four things. Firstly, why we think this is an irreversible decision, and we shouldn't put people into these kind of places. Secondly, talk about sustainability of our planet, of mankind. Thirdly, what motivates people. And fourthly, I would like to talk about old people. Firstly, talking about irreversible decisions. We think that we should not always sustain life. This is not true. For example, we already allow euthanasia. We don't think that if people don't want to die, then we don't have to provide it to them. Furthermore, we think prolonging death is a very different thing from actually making people immortal, right? We think that most people say that they'd like to live forever, but they actually don't know because no one ever has lived forever. No, thank you. I think it's extremely likely that once you're, let's say, 200 years old, you're going to change your mind. This is extremely problematic because it's going to be a one-way ticket, right? You can't go back to being mortal. So effectively what we're doing is that we're giving people a pill to slavery. We don't think we should let people make such important and irreversible choices. Like your only meaningful ways of actually opting out are suicide or euthanasia. The problem is that your primal human instincts just won't let most people do that. Even if you really, really want to die, you're still scared, you won't pull the trigger, right? So therefore, we're going to have a massive amount of people who actually want to die because they're 500 years old, they're disappointed in life, but they simply can't. We think this is an awful destiny to put people into. Furthermore, we think that even people who don't want to opt for a pill in the first place, they're still going to be coerced because in order to stay competitive in that kind of society, no thank you, you can't be competitive if you want to live, let's say, 70 years. Secondly, talking about sustainability. What opening government says is that now we're going to start making more sustainable choices about our states, about our planet, and etc. And because we need to survive longer than, let's say, 70 years or an average lifespan. Firstly, the problem is that a decent amount of people probably won't take the pill because they don't want to live forever. So we're going to have a group that doesn't care about these cool goals of sustaining the planet. No, thank you. But more importantly, we think that let's say in 200 years we will have nothing absolutely left to sustain because people need land, they need food, they need water, and we think that with this extreme overpopulation, we're actually going to enter basically World War III over basic resources. We think the speed of population growth is going to exceed the speed of innovation. That's what the second government has been talking about, right? No, thank you. We think we're going to have, let's say, 100 billion people in 100 years, but we don't think we're going to invent the technology to go to Mars, for example, in that short amount of time. So we're going to have wars over resources. We don't think we want that. So all the points about scientists being able to do research for 500 years in a row, they rely on a premise that we have a planet where you can build a lab and actually do your scientist stuff. Secondly, I think the point about life being valued more won't actually stop the fight over resources from happening because you kind of need them. Thirdly, talking about what motivates people, but before, yeah.
Okay, so you talk about food, land, and water. The food, land, and water on Earth are enough to sustain the Earth's population many, many times over. The problem is that we're materialistic. It's not distributed equally. We change that on our side.
No, how? You would just have people who would live longer and they would have less incentive to fix the problems that we're currently facing. Yes, we might have enough water for the population of today, but still people don't want to deal with that. We don't see why that is going to change. So what motivates people? Firstly, we say that people are motivated by fear of death. We think that, the sense of urgency is extremely important because it pushes people towards action. And yes, today people don't know exactly how long they're going to live, but they're still, getting the rough estimate. For example, statistics say, no, thank you, that I'm going to live about, let's say, 68 years old. I know that I have 68 years to do my stuff. The problem with their plan is that you actually don't know how long you're going to live, you're going to be less productive. Secondly, even if the motivation of people is going to stay the same, and even if we're going to have these cool scientists, no thank you, all kind of that jazz, then you actually can't exercise very much your motivation, your desire to do anything, because a bunch of 500-year-old guys own let's say 70% of the world's wealth, so you can't really do anything with that. You can't be competitive if you were born in 100 years. Finally, talking about old people. We think that, old people, I don't want to sound that bad, but they're weak and they're afraid of their weaknesses. Now, we think this kind of sucks. Yeah.
Okay, so the problem is that you are not solving the problem of extinction. You're simply saying that everybody is doomed to kind of whittle away, die at some point. How does that solve the problem? How do you solve the problem of people being extinct at some point?
We think like gradual progress. We think that's the reason why like the current medicine is fine, because like we're slowly taking steps towards people being able to live longer lives, but at the same time we're also discovering new technologies to actually sustain that population. We think that your plan is actually going to create like immense amounts of like unbalanced stuff. So like old people, like they're weak, they're afraid of their weaknesses. It sucks, but we think it's necessary to create like a sense of perspective. We think that, you know, even the strongest people today, once they get old, they will feel like rather bad. We think that this is important because then if you feel like weak and like bad, then it's more likely that you're going to sympathize with other people who feel like weak and bad. Therefore, you're more likely that you want to help them. More likely, like people are going to, for example, contribute to charities or like contribute to humankind in general. For these reasons, please oppose.
I thank our for fine speech. If we can have another round.